produce negative effects not only on environment but humans, and also affected by emitting carbon fumes, harmful non-degradable waste, contaminated water, and artificial foods. Here I would like to mention that State Bank of Pakistan has also launched schemes to facilitate green entrepreneurship with low interest rates, green financing schemes under the umbrella of green banking for environmentally friendly SMEs. So we should take advantage of, the SME sector should take advantage of such schemes launched by State Bank of Pakistan. Some examples of green entrepreneurship include energy auditing for impact assessment, green consulting for reducing environmental pollution associated with industrial activity, the use of environmental friendly and ecological products, that is food, beauty products, etc., renewable energy installations. This is a new field wherein there are a lot of opportunities for young entrepreneurs by providing them regular platform for starting business. Here, I would like to briefly introduce Federation Pakistan Chambers of Commerce and Industry, which is the apex body, trade body of Pakistan representing private sector. We have over 60 local chambers all over Pakistan, 3 joint chambers of commerce, 12 chambers of small traders, 23 women chambers, and 145 all Pakistan trade associations all over the country, representing the viewpoint of country's private sector for promoting trade and investment in the country. FPCCI works closely with the government of Pakistan on policy issues, industrialization, taxation, trade expansion, competitiveness, ease of doing business, and domestic trade. Internationally, FPCCI is affiliated with different multilateral forums like OIC, SAARC, D8, that is Development Aid, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO, ECO, and Confederation of Asia Pacific Region. Pakistan has honored to host permanent headquarters of 2 multilateral organizations, that is SAARC Chamber of Commerce at Islamabad and Islamic Chamber of Commerce, which is in Karachi, since 1977. In today's program, the CEOs of several companies are present and will share their success stories with our youth and encourage the students to come towards entrepreneurship after completing their education. We need more entrepreneurs from these business schools, like where I am standing now. I've been in the board of governors of IBA also. We mostly, the students which are graduating choose for employments and less in the entrepreneurs, as Mubashir Saab just mentioned. With these words, sir, I would like to thank all the teachers, professors of different universities who have joined us. I also assure FPCCI and Islamic Chamber of Commerce that with Islamic Chamber of Commerce, we'll continue these types of workshops for promoting entrepreneurships in Pakistan. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Amjad. Moving on to our very first session, which is about greening the energy sector. Energy is one of the most critical sectors worldwide. It also is one of the greatest contributors to climate change. Given the global push towards green transitioning, the panel will evaluate upon the opportunities this brings for businesses as well as the challenges that they are facing in their efforts to move to green energy in Pakistan. Our moderator for this panel is Mr. Sajid Aslam, who is ACCA's Regional Lead Public Affairs for the Asia Pacific region and a co-founder and investor in e-commerce. And our speakers for this panel will be Mr. Mujtaba Haider Khan, CEO, Rayon Energy. Rayon Energy, as we all know, provides solar energy solutions. Next, we have Mr. Zain Haq, who is the Vice President, Global Head, Agriculture and Forestry, Chairman of Board at Shell. He is going to join us through Zoom. And lastly, Mr. Hashim Raza, CEO, K Solar. K Solar is backed by K Electric to provide solar energy services in Pakistan. Thank you. Please, sir.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum and very good morning.
Assalamu alaikum ji, can you
Assalamu
hear
alaikum
me?
and very good morning. So we are there, right? I think this is one of a question I always have, and while we are going through these sessions and these critical topics, that in the future somebody will ask, you were there at that time, how you have contributed towards that. Were you a part of a problem or were you a part of a solution? Or at least, did you raise your voice or concern? Did you provide any advice to anybody? Did you inspire one person? I think these are the forums which really help us to at least raise the voice and awareness, and that can build the conversation which can convert into actions and that can create some impact. And while we are talking about this young generation who is very eco-sensitive, I think the first thing I always go from a sustainability perspective, I would like to apologize. We couldn't hand over you the planet the way we got it. We practically were aware of that, and that's not right that we were not aware of what we were doing. It's just that we were not very concerned and we did not really anticipated how it's gonna reflect in the future in terms of the climate action, and we were more in the industrialization phase, and even after the technology phase, I think we were carried away with the romance, with the coolness, with the wealth creation process, that everybody forgot about that this is the planet and this is the only planet we live in, and we have to really preserve that. Nature has created everything in a circular structure. So circular economy is the key word when we start here. Like Mr. have also picked up on the circular structure for the plastic side as well. So I think that's the fundamental concept, how the nature has created that. It's not that the carbon emission is bad. Carbon emission is happening on the earth for a while. It's the absorption power and the speed of the absorption which earth has to really, as a part of the process, has to reflect that. So right now where we stand, our velocity to release carbon in the atmosphere and earth capacity as it's today to absorb with the same velocity, there is a difference. And that's creating a certain challenge in terms of the heat, which is getting captured in the atmosphere and creating a climate action thing. And one of the biggest source for that carbon emission is coming from the energy side. So that's where we will start at. And let's look at the stock. Let's take the stock from Pakistan, where we stand in terms of our renewable energy mix and how your organization is contributing towards that cause to create more renewable energy. So we start with Mustafa and we come there as well. And now Zan has also joined us, right?
And can you hear me? Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me all right?
We can't hear Zan. Zan, are you on mute?
No, I'm not. I can hear you.
Can you check that, please? So Mustafa, we'll start with you, please.
G, just to quickly, shortly, give you a quick answer on where we are in terms of energy mix. I think if you include hydel, probably closer to 30% already, which is, a blessing we've had as Pakistan. We developed our hydel assets early and enjoyed the bounty over 30, 40 years of having cheap electricity. Got used to it. We used to have gas alongside. Carbon emissions weren't a big issue. But then when you talk about the recent developments in renewable energy, I think the dominant technologies have been wind and solar, PV, and various others, but I think these are the two that have scaled. Pakistan hasn't done much, to be perfectly honest. I think you have to be honest about your scorecard. I think in terms of our potential, fifth largest country by population, huge growth potential, we have hardly done any renewables. If you compare us to India, India has huge ambitions. Now the third largest, country in terms of demand for renewable energy, already has a large industrial complex coming on the back of that, manufacture a large chunk of the renewable equipment now as well. So very indigenous in terms of their own demand, compare that to Bangladesh. So I think we have developed some wind in the wind corridor, but not to the capacity. We could have done like tens of gigawatts of wind power, which is one of the cheapest sources when you connect to the grid. And solar PV has been primarily, I would say, indigenous on a self-sufficiency basis by the industry or the residential segment. I think the grid connected part of solar has been only 500 megawatt, 600 megawatt so far. So if you compare that to our overall energy demand, which is closer to 30 gigawatts, that's very minuscule. So I think the things that have held us back, being a developing country, I think there is this big climate imperative. And funnily enough, this morning, while doing my run, I was thinking about the same things you were talking about. What are those questions my future generation will be asking now that I'm a recent parent? Which side were you on? What were you doing? Where did you spend your time when you were working? What problems you were trying to solve, and were you part of the problem or you part of the solution? And I think you also apologize on behalf of the previous generation. I think a lot of apologies are in order, not just about the climate, but also the shape the country is in. We're in a pretty dire shape as a country. So the previous generations have a lot to answer for. And I think this is one of the fundamental things that gets you excited, passionate about the cause, which is, I would say, well beyond renewable energy. The reason energy is important because energy contributes 70 to 80% of the carbon emissions. And there are some fundamental questions that need to be answered. I think that need to be addressed in terms of the context. Of course, energy contributes a large chunk, but that energy is not just about power generation. Only 25% comes from power generation. Another 20% comes from transport. Then you're talking about the hard sectors of the industry, cement making, steel, fertilizer, which is very intense on natural gas. And then, of course, the consumer end, where you have agriculture contributing a large chunk. And then you've got your consumer side using very inefficient appliances, where we waste a lot of energy. So as you can see, the challenge cuts across all of the different sectors in the economy. And I feel therein lies the opportunity. If I had to set the context, I would say that the world is on an unprecedented scale trying to relearn everything from manufacturing something as basic as fertilizer. How do we do that? By consuming less, emitting less carbon, to making energy, basic energy, to how we go from point A to point B, transport, and agriculture, foods. So I think that's the biggest opportunity. And I think the last thing I would say is that when you talk about entrepreneurship, the fundamental thing we all have to think about is what are those fundamental problems we want to immerse ourselves in solving? What problems do we want to solve and spend the next 5, 10, 20 years, on figuring out solutions to those problems? So I think that's where the whole journey starts. I'll leave it at that. Maybe.
Thank you, Mr. Hashim, if we come to the same question, like Mr. expanded that the scope of the energy, that's not only on the electricity side, and that's rightly so. So we look at your organization and the case like we are looking at the K Solar right now, how K Solar is contributing towards the green energy initiative from electricity perspective, and your perspective around the overall energy mix, and that's also beyond electricity, what we should be doing, like Mustafa expanding a little bit on that.
So that's a different question from the overall Pakistan energy landscape, right? So, but I would like to add on the Pakistan energy landscape as well, just to add to what Mustafa said. I think our priorities as a nation have not been consistent. I think our priorities as a country have not been to deliver a value better than before to the next generation. On the humorous side, in Pakistan, we don't, the parents don't answer the next generation. So I think that's a good thing. So we don't have to worry about answering our children. But I think
yeah, it has changed, Hashim. It has changed. We are answerable to our kids now.
So I think as a nation, when we focused on developing nuclear, for example, potential, we were more thinking militarily rather than the peaceful source uses of the same energy that we worked on for at least 3 decades, right? Otherwise, nuclear energy in the entire developed world is taken as one of the best and most efficient forms of renewable energy, right? So I think that even after developing it in 98, even after that, for almost 25 years, quarter of a century, we have not done anything around that, right? So that's one major area that we need to focus on. And as Mustafa already highlighted, solar and wind, we are less than 5%. We represent less than 5% of that. So it's basically marginal, but there are no policies that are focusing on doing it. Just making an announcement that we'll do 10,000 megawatts would not do anything, would not move the needle. 10,000 megawatts is around $5 billion. It's a $5 billion. And just to add to the recent calamity that happened in the shape of floods, we lost around $5 billion of Pakistan's economy in this flood. So it is the same amount that would have needed to put together an infrastructure of around 10,000 megawatt that you're talking about. And so now I'll come back to the 2K Solar and what they are doing, if they are doing anything in changing the energy mix for Pakistan, right? So K Electric is the only vertically integrated utility in Pakistan, which means that they generate, they transmit, and they distribute. So all the 3 parts of any utility that is being done around the world. K Electric is the only one because all the others are government regulated. So they all come under WAPDA or the ministry's direct enforcement. So K Electric has almost a landscape of around 4,000 to 4,200 megawatts. Out of that, as of this time, again, just like the broad energy mix, we contribute less than 4% from the renewable source. But as we speak, we are in the process of building another 600 megawatts of solar generation, which means that in over the next 3 to 5 years time, we may have our generation mix would increase to around 10%. But K Solar is not only helping in improving the generation mix, but we are also doing providing industrial solutions, even residential solutions. And I was just having this conversation with Mustafa and with the faculty inside in the conference room, that the actual role of entrepreneurship falls in the rooftop solar solution, where people can have their own smaller companies and they can start business right from the get-go. But for that, I think government needs to have a set pattern of standards, so that we do not encourage just everybody without any standards using substandard equipment and bringing the overall quality of your generation lower than par. So I don't know if I answered your
No,
question.
no, thank you, thank you. I think you raised a very valid question around the standards. I think if I just pick up my last experience from Australia, there are 6,000 standard. Even from a service side, if the plumber is working, what is the standard? How they will come in, how they will leave, how they will clean, and even every car, every equipment, everything has got a standard and something which anybody, any entrepreneur, any business has to deliver. That's a minimum one. That's not something which is a max. That's a minimum one which it ensures, and you can go beyond that. And the entrepreneurs are the one who are going beyond the defined standard. That's one of a challenge definitely for Pakistan. We do not have defined standards, and where we have, it's not implemented in a true way. So just going back to Zan, if Zan, you can hear us, and
I
if we
can hear
can
you.
hear
I
Zan
heard
as
you
well,
throughout.
can you hear
Can you
us?
hear me now? Can you hear me?
Zan, we can't hear you.
Ah,
Is there any way we can raise the volume or at least connect it? You can hear?
yeah. I will. You can't
Yeah,
hear
yeah,
me
it's
still?
it started. We can hear now. Yeah, please.
I don't know
So
what happened, but yeah. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Great to be. I wish I was. I can see that I'm right between my fellow panelists, so I'm. I think I'm in the right place, but just much larger. Great to be here. So, did you want me to answer that question, or did you have a separate question, or should I just add on?
with your view around the status in Pakistan and how Shell is really contributing towards that.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I was listening to what all of you were talking about, and I fully agree with what you said. I don't want to repeat everything, but just perhaps to say that I share the anxiety around what I will answer to my children. My children are already college or almost college, so they're already asking me very difficult questions. And I've had a lifetime in oil and gas, and my last couple of roles have been more on the green side. But I must say that I feel deep anxiety personally. And as a Pakistani about Pakistan, I feel deep anxiety on a whole range of fronts, as was also talked about. I think that a couple of points that I'll add to what's been said already is that we have the predominant supply source for energy comes from hydrocarbons, from oil and gas, and we are blessed with a river system that actually allows us a large amount of hydel, thank God, and we can do much more on that. But I think that, I mean, the growing trend and the growing areas of solar and wind are going to become extremely important, already have been important. So from the supply side, I mean, that is to be recognized, and a lot more needs to be done. And at the same time, we need to also recognize that if we look at the average access to energy of the average Pakistani, we have over 40 million people without access to energy. Can you hear me still or no?
We can.
Okay.
We can hear you.
We have over 40 million people who don't have access to energy, and this is electricity and transportation, and a lot of them are using kerosene, which has its own issues. I mean, so imagine the first part of the thing is to bring up affluence levels so that the average quality of life is that of an average world citizen. And then the other part of the equation is how do we supply these energy needs? So I think that the troika over here, that it is important that it works together, is the government, the private sector, and academic research institutes. And it is such an important troika because wherever we see it in different countries, it's not only everybody's complicit in the problem, and everybody's complicit in the solution. And I think it'll be very, very important for all of us to work in tandem with each other. The last point I will, what is Shell doing? Shell, of course, has quite a long history in Pakistan. No one can do this alone. This has to be a coalition of willing and able participants and allies. And together we need to really bring about the right standards that you talked about, the incentive structures, for the economic engine to work, that makes, and this is where it ties into entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship thrives when the commercial and economic engine works. And that is a very, very important part. And that is the missing link that we need to be able to bring forward in this space. And the last point I will also make is that, when we look at entrepreneurship, a lot of people, I was at another seminar a couple of months ago in a different country. And one of the things that I was asked was that the energy industry is an entrenched industry and a very old one. So what could entrepreneurs do in this? My answer to them was that, well, actually, my answer to them was not on the spot. I thought of it later. I wish I had thought of it on the spot. But my answer, if I could turn back time, would have been that, the entrepreneurs have been behind Uber and Careem and all of that, and they've entered a very fragmented. Uber has been the biggest taxi company in the world without owning a single taxi. Airbnb has become the biggest hotel company perhaps in the world without owning a single hotel room. So what stops all of this fragmentation from being brought to a fore? And the answer to that is this: digitization allows us to do that, whether we are aggregating. So, I mean, some of the things that Shell has been doing has been around the EV space. So we're working with K Electric around that. We've already got 3 chargers in Pakistan and have plans for more. Now that's an area for a lot of aggregation that entrepreneurs could think about. How do you optimize fueling? When do you fuel? Especially in the B2B space, there's battery swapping that is there as well, which is another very interesting area. Just coming back to Shell, some of the things that we've been doing is there was solar panels on roofs being talked about. So I mean, what we're doing on our side is talking about under canopy infrastructure with solar that aids and abets electricity needs on site, and also doing nature-based solutions. We have large afforestation and reforestation programs that we are looking at. And of course, then there's carbon credit trading, which we can come back to at a later stage in this. So these are some points to Sajid to add to what has already been raised.
No, thank you, Zan. I think we have got a certain view, and we will be coming back for questions to the audience as well. We will just explore a couple of other areas, and we will come to the questions from audience. Just one question which keep coming back: is there any demand for the green energy? Our business is demanding green energy. Pakistan is still like less than 1% of carbon emission in terms of the total pool. Pakistan contributes less than 1% of CO2 emission in the global environment. Do we really need that shift? And our business is demanding the green energy. So that's one of an economic question, because if they demand, then there will be somebody who will start producing it. So are we seeing a demand, or it's a nice to have because everybody is doing it and the government also is committed to SDGs and that's why we are doing it? Or there is an economic reality, there is a demand from the business to do so? Mishpal, let's start from you.
Yeah, so you know the reality, that's why you're smiling, right? A lot of businesses talk about sustainability, to be perfectly honest, including multinationals. I'm not going to blame the local businesses, but multinationals. So we started about 8-9 years ago. When solar was probably 10 times more expensive than where it is today. It was more expensive than the grid. It was a leap of faith for a lot of people. We used to install like 50 kilowatt systems. We have since then done 270 megawatt of solar installed in the country across multiple business models. We've done 70 megawatt hour of lithium storage. We had done none 4 years ago. And these environmental considerations were there 6-7 years ago, but it's really the economic imperative. This is when renewables started reaching grid parity. That's when the demand started picking up, right? So while there are environmental considerations, there are pressures, international pressures on, especially on export-oriented organizations, on FMCGs. Some of them signed up to net zero, but it's until something becomes affordable and makes economic sense, there's no demand, to be quite frank. But then what you have to look at is that what are the global trends? And Mubashir Saab talked about the Midas touch, and he gave the analogy of a surfer looking at the wave. And another saying from Elon Musk, I was listening to one of his interviews, and he said, fundamentally what the leaders have to do is to build a forecasting model in their head. The world has many variables attached to it, and you have to be able to build a forecasting model and constantly update it and see where the world is going. So there are certain mega trends that are shaping the world. And those mega trends are having an impact on economics. They're having an impact on efficiency of technology and clearly on adaptation of those technologies. You can always try and fight those, but you can't fight some of those mega trends. So while we keep referring to this point that we emit only 1% of the global carbon emissions. That's correct. But I think that's where people make a mistake between carbon emissions and pollution, right? So we're talking about carbon emissions, and the world has a single carbon budget. Yes, we know that developed countries have exhausted that. It's very unfair, but it's happened. There's a singular carbon budget, and we know that if we go beyond 500 gigatons between now and whenever 2030, the world will reach 1.5 degree rise in temperature. Irrespective, we emit it or the developed countries emit it. It's unlike pollution. Pollution is a local phenomenon. And carbon emissions and greenhouse gas emissions is a global phenomenon, but they go into the upper atmosphere and they have a very long half-life. So first thing, the global regulation will not let you emit carbon. I think we have to abide by the laws of physics, right? So that's going to happen. Second thing is, of course, when there's this mega trend, the world is going to spend more and more resources on developing technologies and bringing down or improving the economics of technologies that support low carbon economy. So fundamentally, if you fight against that, if you keep saying coal is great, yes, coal serves our local purpose, but coal will continue to become more expensive. They will make it harder and harder for you to dig coal out of the ground. There's no financing available. Already the financing behind green technologies is probably 1/3 the finance cost. So if you think about energy as an infrastructure, there are two things you need to think about. You need to think about cost of capital and the capital cost. Both are very important. Cost of capital for green technology is already 1/3 of what it is for conventional fuel. And similarly, capital costs are dropping at 30% annually for solar, wind, and other technologies and batteries. So you can see that there's a mega trend which is making these technologies better and better in terms of economics. As I said earlier, economics trumps all other considerations. So the economics for these technologies will keep getting better. We started our journey 8 years ago. Solar was probably twice as expensive as the grid. 8 years later, solar is half the cost of the grid. Right? So you can see that cost curve already come down to a level where it's a no-brainer. So now coming back to the point, is there demand? Surely there's demand. Right? This is the cheapest source. You'll be a fool not to invest in renewable. So that's why there are multiple scenarios. We spoke about government regulation or no government regulation. This is going to happen, right? So maybe the government will be successful in implementing 10,000 megawatts. Maybe they won't be successful in 10,000 megawatts. But if they don't do it, everybody else will do it, right? And that will cause a bigger problem for the government because these people will defect from the grid. So this is inevitable. Now calling the future, the forecast, the mega trends, the wave, this is where the wave is going. You can decide to ride it or you can decide not to ride it. And this is the global wave. And now just one final point, in terms of taking that forward, I think there's a very simple equation that we follow, we believe in, which is when coal becomes more expensive than solar and battery, then the whole world will be running on solar and battery. And 6 years ago, people used to say that's like pipe dream. Right now, people are saying probably we're 3-4 years, from that point. So it's inevitable. Don't think of it from a carbon emissions perspective. How many carbon emissions we emit? Are we responsible? We may not be responsible, but the world is heading that way. Might as well play a meaningful role in solving one of the biggest global crises, or sit out and don't ride the wave and be like we have been over the last 50 years. We have missed the industrial revolution. We missed the information revolution. Are we going to miss the energy transformation revolution? Don't do that. So I think solve the biggest problem.
And I think we will be effective if we are not contributing, because Pakistan is surrounded by 30% of the world glaciers. So if the temperature really goes up, we are the one who are sitting in a most vulnerable situation. So Hashab, you want to add something there?
Yeah, so again, I would, with Mushtaba's such rich knowledge around all this subject, I would just add the local aspect of it, right? So I'll just try to localize this energy credits and carbon credits and net zero, and would try to answer whether there's demand or not. So thanks to NEPRA, there would always be demand, right? So I mean, just over the last 3 months, the energy tariff in Karachi has increased from 19 rupees to 29 rupees. Right? So at 19 rupees, whether it was making sense or not, I would leave it up to you that whether now would it make sense at 29 rupees or not. And K Electric, so the cost of unit for K's generation is actually more than 50 rupees. So there's a lot of subsidy even when we are offering 29 rupee tariff. So eventually it's going to go way higher than that. So whether would it make sense at that price or not, I would leave it up to you. So I did, as part of an investment banking team in New York, I did an IPO of a solar company in 2006. At that time, to Mustaba's point, 1 kilowatt was 2,500 US dollars. At this time, 1 kilowatt is less than 400 US dollars, right? So that's how the price parity is going. However, now if I want to localize it, so one food of thought for all the business students here for this school, because this is something I've been thinking about and have not been getting time. I know we keep using terms net zero, carbon credits. Please study up on that, because I think that's a huge area for entrepreneurs to find out how can Pakistan be a part of this carbon trading and selling carbon credits. There are so many companies that actually Mustaba's company has solarized, yet they do not trade any single carbon credit, even though they are saving a lot of carbon credits, but they do not trade a single carbon credit. So there's a lot of potential for carbon credits consulting companies here in Pakistan. And you can just work with Mustaba's customers and tell them, oh, you are already generating so many carbon credits. How can we help you trade those, either in Europe or in the US markets, or even in the Chinese markets? A solar credit, a carbon credit today is trading for around $48 in the US market, around $52 in the European Union, and $3 for a Chinese credit. So $1 का भी बिके यार Pakistani credit for nothing as of this time. It's a huge potential for students to research on, to do some consulting work, and to get to a point where you can just help companies like US Apparel, who are already exporting into the US market. इतने सारे एक्सपोर्टर हैं जो ऑलरेडी कर रहे हैं, सोलर भी लगाई हुई है, वो कार्बन क्रेडिट बचा सकते हैं. सो ये एक बिल्कुल एक डिफरेंट आइडिया था that I wanted to float to the business school students to start working on. But again, coming back to your point, there is huge demand even as of this time. Solar is almost at a 60% discount to the grid, which is great, and the grid is going to keep going up because of inflation, because of your higher energy costs. So don't worry about, even if we don't worry about what the entire world is doing, even if we just worry about our energy bills for this month or for the next month, it would make definitely a lot of sense.
Thank you. I think just from a carbon credit perspective, do look up the Pakistani company Delta Blue, who has just listed their carbon credit 250,000 on Singapore, 250,000 tons at Singapore. So do study that one. It's a good one. And there's a good way to really fund a lot of renewable energy and sustainability initiative in Pakistan by leveraging some of the opportunity which exist only in Pakistan, even the wind energy and all that, those corridor, and then converting them into the carbon credit and selling them and funding that project back and making money out of it. I think the key question here was whether the economics need to work or it's a social work. So economics need to work here, right? So for every entrepreneur, in a long run, it can't be only a social cost. It has to sustainable, and it has the economics need to work. I think just in the interest of time, and I'll coming back to you as well. I'll ask you, and I'll need a very quick answer on that. number one, if we change the energy mix for the grid, right? And that's a very specific electricity related question, not the overall energy. If we change the energy mix for the grid, do we really need to change the distribution infrastructure? Does it require an additional investment? And do we have any solution to that? And at the same time, I would like you to really pick up the top 3 recommendations for either a policymaker, regulator, or businesses, what they need to do to really improve the renewable energy. I'll start with you, Zan, first.
Yeah, I mean, so thank you for that, and I'll answer that. And perhaps just to dovetail from the previous question, that yes, the economics most certainly have to work, but also not to forget that, I mean, it's as we are getting more and more of the new generation coming in, we are seeing different sorts of questions that are being asked. Can you still hear me, by the way?
Yes, we can. We can.
You can. Okay, I see. I could just see myself. That's why I'm asking. So, I mean, there are many different choice points that are coming in. And the second point is that we need to be integrated internationally. I'll give you one example around that. Sustainable aviation fuels is something that COP27 and COP26 had been particularly emphatic about. So sustainably produced aviation fuels are going to be very important if we want to continue to service international carriers that are coming to Karachi, Lahore, and Islamabad, and to some of the other secondary airports. So, I mean, that is one of the reasons that in being integrated in the transport fuel mix in marine and aviation become very, very important. Just to come to your current question, that would there be changes in distribution infrastructure required? New energies will always require newer additional infrastructure. I mean, in some cases, it'll be quite drastic. In other cases, it will just be add-on and bolt-on solutions. But when we're looking at, and this especially when we're looking at the whole plethora of solutions from production of energy from wind farms or solar farms, we of course need additional infrastructure. But also when we look for low carbon fuels. So I just talked about aviation fuel. Sustainable aviation fuel and renewable diesel are actually sourced from things like used cooking oil, from crops like jatropha. We're an agri country, and that is a big opportunity. And at the same time, a lot of distribution infrastructure would be needed both from the feedstock end and the distribution end, as well as upgradation of transmission pipelines and charging infrastructure, talking about the power side. So it is important to consider and plan for this when developing our own strategies. And there are many points along these value chains where entrepreneurs can actually bring a lot of creativity and economics to the forefront. The one thing I will say, and there was a comment made earlier about understanding and optimizing and having optimization models actually always being very sharp. And it is really important that as an ecosystem, we synchronize and have a clear view of our supply and demand mass balance and the infrastructure that carries these molecules, whether it's fuel molecules from a liquid hydrocarbon or a energy molecule from electricity one. The second question that you asked, Ajit, was that what would some of the top recommendations be?
Then very quickly, because we need to get 1 or 2 questions from the audiences.
Got it. So number one, businesses and governments must work together to unlock new technologies and design and build new infrastructure. Firstly, good policy needs to balance mandates and standards and incentives to create a push and pull. And third and last one is that policies need to synchronize supply and demand efficiently and create that economic engine to work.
Thank you, sir. Yep. The same question, like any 3 top recommendation and the impact on the distribution infrastructure.
So I don't foresee any significant impact on the infrastructure, just because you need to keep, even if in the status quo scenario, you need to keep investing in the transmission and distribution infrastructure. So there would not be any significant investment. However, in terms of the three recommendations, I think we need to standardize. One, we need to introduce some standards for the entrants, just so that we don't spoil the entire market space in a way that the government would have to jump in because of a lot of short circuits, because of a lot of substandard equipment and whatnot. So I think we need to standardize. Second, we need to liberate the sector in a way, just like in net metering. The revenues currently are almost at par at the non-peak rates. So I think that needs to stay there. If somebody is generating from solar, he at least should not be penalized from the government side, which means that at whatever tariff he's buying it from the local distribution company, the same tariff should be adjusted to him as well. So that's the second part. And the third part is, I think Pakistan is an agriculture economy, and we need to focus from grassroots level on the agriculture solarization, which means the tube wells, which means the production of agriculture sector, and how can we make the energy more accessible and efficient for the agriculture sector. That's it. Thank you, Asha.
Gee, so I'll just start in the reverse order. You asked if distribution is a problem. I feel that's the biggest problem. But in Pakistan, if you look at the energy system, the single buyer, single seller has been the biggest problem. But within the single seller part, where the government has been selling majority of the power, I think the weakest link in the energy value chain is distribution. And one example of that is net metering, right? The fact that the distribution companies collectively cannot net meter hundreds of connections around Pakistan, I think is a big example of where the problem lies. That's where your biggest losses are. We produce very expensive power, and we lose 35% of that in our distribution system. It's dilapidated. I would say this, because this is an entrepreneurship forum, and I feel that when an entrepreneur has to focus on the problem they're solving. Fall in love with the problem, not with the product, not with the solution. And what are the fundamental problems Pakistan has? And I like Mubashir Saab's talk when he said, don't think about the Ubers of the world. Don't think about what works in Silicon Valley. It's not going to work here. We need to understand what our local problems are. It's when we have gone into the industry, we've realized economics is not a big problem on the grid. So there are two main things. One, that the connected consumer and industry, for them, grid is right now probably the cheapest source. Why aren't they on the grid? 50% of the industry is off grid. They have connections, but they don't use those connections. So what's the problem? It's the reliability. So we need to solve for reliability of the grid when we talk about the connected consumer. Otherwise, more and more consumers will keep defecting from the grid. The biggest automakers making cars on diesel. It's just crazy. When you think about that, the biggest cable manufacturer manufactures MV cable on diesel, the most expensive fuel, because they cannot find other reliable sources of running their factories. This is the most antiquated, energy system you'll find anywhere. So solve fundamental problems. Those problems have to be local. Those problems, a lot of them lie in the distribution system. Distribution system is not reliable. A lot of investment has to go into making the distribution system reliable. But again, do not rely on government money. Invite private sector to come and solve those problems. Technology exists to make it more reliable. So that's one part. I think the other part is, of course, the market has to open up. The single buyer, single seller setup has to be disrupted. Is the root cause of all our, not just energy problems, but economic problems. Because at the heart of the twin deficits is the fact that we lose so much money in our energy system, and the fact that we have to import all this imported fuel. We have to make this system more reliable. So the wholesale market concept, CTBCM, those sort of initiatives have to take hold. I think that's very, very fundamental if we have to make this whole system more viable and the economy more viable. Third thing I would say is that when all of us are very privileged, we have a grid connection, reliable grid connection, even though the bills are higher, but we get electricity, right? Or we have backup. But 30% of a very large country is off grid. They don't have access to this grid. So when we talk about in our discourse, we mostly talk about the grid. We don't talk about the off grid. And I think these are the areas where the government has to get in. Government has to stop worrying too much about the grid connected consumer. Yes, they'll have less or they'll pay more, but they can afford to do that. 30% of the country does not have access to the grid. We need to solve for those. The policy needs to actively incentivize entrepreneurs to go into off-grid areas and solve that problem. And I think for entrepreneurs, it's a big problem to solve, to get in there and build solutions that are viable.
No, thank you very much. I think a couple of things which I'll pick up and I'll come to the question. I think the concept of value chain and the distribution, when we are talking about, Zan also talked about the value chain, we don't have to really solve all the problem and every problem which exists with the green energy. There are different pieces within that value chain which we can pick up. Even the disposal of those batteries and the solar cells, which will be happening a couple of years from now, how are we going to handle that? Because that's a sustainability challenge. It's a waste which will be coming out. Can we reuse it? There is anything which we can do with those. Similarly, the value chains will start, or a supply chain or infrastructure will start changing with the change of the type of the energy we are going to use. So I think there are different pieces and opportunities which exist within that value chain, which as an entrepreneur, you can solve, or you can jump on, or you can at least explore. So we open the floor for 2 questions quickly. If anybody has a question, we can raise the hand and we can. Yep, please.
Thank you. So again, I have this question about the supply chain of renewable energies. You will get lithium or cobalt from most of the countries which have human rights violation. You get it from Congo, you get it from Argentina, you get it from China, and now, fortunately or unfortunately, you'll get it from Afghanistan. How are you going to make a supply chain sustainable where there is slave labor involved? Second question is, with the solar panels, is it going to be the next plastic bag problem for the world? How are you going to reuse it? Because there is just enough silicon in the world. Then there is a dead end.
You want to take?
Yeah, I'll go in the reverse order. Silicon is the second most abundant element in the, on Earth. So we're not going to run out of silicon, right? It's in the sand. So let's just calm down about that. Second thing I would say is, yes, full life cycle thinking on materials is very important. That's why I really appreciate Mubashir Saab's initiative on, circular plastics. And we need to understand what to do with the waste. Yes, there's some hazard in disposing of these solar panels. They use mercury, and there's other material in certain panels which needs to be disposed of properly. It's not unsolvable. The third thing I would say is that you can't solve all the problems in the world, right? So again, we need to calm down about that, right? So there will be in your value chain some elements that come through slave labor, unfortunately, right? It might be, you don't have control. If the Western countries are pulling, cobalt from the mines in Congo and they're okay about it, right? These are red herrings. These are red herrings that will stop you from moving towards a better solution. Of course, there will not be 100% clean solution out there, but you have to think about relativism, right? So relative to what we have today, if we move down to these technologies, yes, it's 100 times cleaner, 100 times better. Fundamentally, if you think about the holy grail in the green economy, you convert all your power generation to renewables, and then convert all energy used to electric. There's your equation, right? Which solves for carbon emissions. Does it solve economic problems for us? Think about all those motorcycles out there, right? So in Pakistan, 50% of the imported fuel that goes into transport goes into those motorcycles. Smaller the engine, lower the efficiency, right? So we waste a lot of fuel there, $2 billion, $3 billion of imports. So if we move down, let's say if every household had a solar panel and we're getting free electricity, they were charging their electric bikes. With that, you will end up saving $3 to $4 billion of imported fuel, right? So there's an economic imperative for us to move down that path. Finally, I would say that, yes, localization of the supply chain is very, very important. There are some elements you'll be able to localize immediately. Some elements will take us time, maybe it will take us 10 years. Yes, we are a mineral-rich country. The fundamentals and the environment has to be right for people to go into mining and those difficult sectors. But hopefully, if Reko Dick happens, then the mining sector will open up big time. But for that, you need a sustainable environment. For anybody to invest into indigenization, you need sustainable demand. So that question we've already answered. Yes, demand is there. It will keep on growing based on the economic imperative. Second thing is, do we have sustainable policies? And that's the big question that's keeping a lot of people at bay.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope it answered some of the questions there. Yeah, we can pick it up on the network. That if we can. We just take one and then you can pick it up during the networking. Is it okay? Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum ji. I'm Maham and I'm from Allied Bank, and I'm looking at a corporate portfolio where we have numerous customers borrowers who are actually consuming thermal energy. So my question to the forum here is that while you're promoting the small entrepreneurs to enter into this segment, what about the large scale manufacturers, the industries that are heavily consuming these? And for those, not only that are import bills are taking the burden, and also because the environmental impact that you're just talking about. How do you think that can be overcome? Because if you look at cement, it's heavily dependent on coal. And then we have probably RNG based fertilizer production. That may not have that much of a detrimental impact on the environment. However, again, the import bill is affected.
No, thank you. Thank you. So your question, if I summarize it, there is a lot of fossil fuel which is being consumed, not only to generate energy or electricity, there are other sectors which are doing that. Yeah. Zen, do you want to pick this up?
Yes, I can. I think I got the gist of it. I couldn't quite hear her, but I got your summary version. And I think that there are considerable number of industries which are going to be, and there's going to be a life cycle here, right? I mean, and there will be some industries that will be very, very dependent on natural gas and fuel oil and diesel. But I think that the most important question to ask over here is that, I mean, by sector, if I got the question right, I mean, sector wise, what is the life cycle and what are the replacements? And there will be replacements, whether we're talking about hydrogen or we're talking about, of course, they all have their own economics, or we talked about sustainable aviation fuel. There are some sectors which are more difficult to abate. So, for example, long distance, and one of the panelists talked about all of transport coming onto electrification. So it's so urban transport, passenger cars are going to be coming on sooner, and already we see that. But long distance commercial road transport, which is over 14-ton trucks, are going to take some time, and they'll come to electrification, but probably are in places via hydrogen. So hydrogen might come in first, but that also is dependent on. So that's an example of how it's a very precise trajectory in depending on the industry that we are talking about. In the case of fertilizer, green fertilizer, of course, I mean, very natural gas dependent, but green ammonia is coming out more and more as part of the equation. And of course, ammonia is used to make ammonium sulfate, which is fertilizer.
No, thank you, Zen. Hashim, you want to quickly add and then we wrap up.
There is no question about industries, small scale, large scale, to move to renewables or not. They have to move to renewables, but before moving to renewables, they need uninterrupted power, right? So, अब अगर उनका already उन्हें बिजली मिल रही है, बेशक thermal से मिल रही है. If the car manufacturers, जिस तरह to Mushtaba's point, if the car manufacturers are manufacturing cars on diesel generators, so उनको तो बिजली चाहिए, सबसे पहले उन्हें बिजली चाहिए. अगर उनके पास उसकी sources ही नहीं है, तो वो जो भी बेशक thermal से चले, तो फिर बिजनेसमैन ने तो यूज करना है. हाँ, they are all talking about solar solutions. They are all, everybody. मुश्तबा की भी ये experience होगा. All industries, whether it's fertilizer, cement, car manufacturing industry, everybody is thinking about those solutions, but they want to have access to that as soon as possible, which is not taking place in the current economy. एक आखिरी बात मैं करना चाहता हूँ, I think for the entire forum. Just last week, I was driving around with an international energy investor from Boat Club. I'm not from Karachi, you would understand it better. from boat club to Karachi golf club. अब एक इंटरनेशनल एनर्जी इन्वेस्टर है कराची में, पहली दफा आया और वो मुझे आके कहता है यार आर यू एन एनर्जी पुअर कंट्री? मैंने कहा हाँ, हमारे पास तो बिजली नहीं है, पानी नहीं है. तो कहता है आई हैव नॉट सीन अ सिंगल बाइसिकल फ्रॉम ऑल दीज 15 किलोमीटर. मैंने एक सिंगल बाइसिकल नहीं देखी, सारे बाइक पे हैं, सारे गाड़ियों पे हैं. तो अगर तो इफ इट्स अ पुअर कंट्री, then why don't I see a lot of bicycles around here? So this is a food of thought for all of us कि अगर हम ये सोचते हैं कि हमने बचाना है तो कुछ तो अपनी तरफ से भी contribute करें.
No, thank you, Hashim. I think that's a very good close. So it's not only about what happening in energy, it's also about our behavior, responsible production, responsible consumption, what we are doing, what is our contribution. Thank you very much, Mustafa, Hashim, and Zan. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for the audience. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the panelists.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you very much.
Moving forward to our next session, which is about plastic pollution, local solutions to a global problem. Our moderator for this panel is Mr. Syed Saad Ali Pasha, who is the head of business development at ICCIA. And our speakers will be Dr. Yasir Nawab, associate professor, dean at the National Textile University, Mr. Khwaja Bilal Hussain, Senior Vice President, Head of Strategy, Sustainability and Business Development at Angro, Mr. Sharik Vorab, former President, Karachi Chamber of Commerce, Ms. Shiza Aslam, Head of Circular Plastics at KSBL, and Mr. Walid Ayyub, Senior Packaging and Sustainability Development Manager, Unilever. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I am Saad Pasha, Head of Business Development at the Islamic Chamber of Commerce, Industry and Agriculture. So why are we having this conversation? Pakistan is not really a big producer of plastic waste. We produce 0.95% of plastic production globally. Of the 400 million tons of plastic produced every year, we just contribute 3.8 million tons. So why are we having this conversation? We're not even in the top 10 countries producing plastic waste, not in the top 10 countries per capita producing plastic waste, despite having the 5th largest population. So, but there is a problem. We see our streams, our rivers filled with plastic bags. So to localize a global problem of all the plastic waste that we produce, 70% is not treated or it's not managed. Of the 20 to 35% which is managed, it is informally picked up, it's scavenged, it's incinerated, it is burned, it is reused. Things which should not be reused, they're cleaned up and they're reused. This is causing a public health problem in Pakistan. We are losing our immunity that we cannot even stand up to a common flu. So I'll share certain scary stats with you. All of us right now are consuming 21 grams of microplastics each month. That's around 250 grams of plastics per year. What that does to our body is still to be researched upon. In 2019, because of consuming microplastics, 2019, for the first time, microplastics were detected in human blood and human breast milk. What is that doing to our future generations? We haven't researched about it. the Indus River alone dumps 10,000 tons of microplastics each year into the ocean. Pakistan consumes 55 billion single-use plastic bags each year. So there is a big problem. But how do we manage it? It's not a standalone thing that we just focus on plastics, because in the streams, in the nalas, in the gutters, and all these things, there is untreated gray water, there is plastic, reusable plastic, and it is turning into a toxic cocktail, which all of us are consuming. So I was reading Bilal's post on Medium. So if a person lives in KPK and he comes to Karachi, he's actually consuming what he or she excreted. So that toxins leaching out of plastic, reusing non-reusable plastic, that is causing a public health disaster, and we do not know how it will impact our DNA in the long run. So to talk about these very interesting and scary things, we have a panel with us. From Angro Corporation, we have Khwaja Bilal Hussain. From KSBL, we have Shiza Aslam. Unilever, we have Waleed. We have Saqib Vora, former president. Sorry, I'm so sorry. From Karachi's Chamber of Commerce. And Dr. Yasir Nawab, who is joining us remotely, I guess, from National Textile University. So because we are at an academic institution, I would like to start with Dr. Yasir. So, Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Yasir. Thank you for joining us remotely. So I would start with what is the academic discourse about plastic pollution? Are we really talking about this in our institutions or universities? Could you unmute yourself? Cannot hear you, Doctor. Still can't hear you. Dr. Yasir, we still can't hear you.
It's okay now?
Yeah, it's fine.
Yes, in fact, I unmuted and someone tried at the same time, and that's why it was muted again. So I'm sorry.
You increase the volume, please.
So in fact, it's very important problem, and what we are talking about. In fact, it's about the consequences on health, the consequences or the impacts on economy, on the environment. But the problem, in fact, the core is the mismatch between resources that we are, in fact, that are available on the planet and whatsoever we are using. In fact, there is a great mismatch. So if we talk today, what we are using globally, it's 2 times than the resources which are available on the planet. For example, if we start living like the Americans, the resources that are required, they are 4 times of the resources which are available on the planet. So due to this mismatch of utilization, in fact, our resources, they are being depleted. We are talking about plastics. In 40 years, there will be no more petroleum on this planet if we continue using with the same speed. So the problem, in fact, is the utilization. And due to this overutilization, we are creating a lot of problem of health, problem of carbon dioxide, and all the problems that we are talking about. So in academia, of course, there's a lot of awareness about it. We are working with several international platforms as well. You know, for this problem, there is a 9R strategy that we are focusing. The most important is reduce by design. We need to design our products so that they can be recycled, so that we bring the product into the loop. Means there'll be less, in fact, load on the resources of the planet. And then there are other strategies like reuse, reduce, refuse. These are at the level of user, then user to business, repair, refurbish, remanufacture, and then the last are repurpose and recycle. So we need to in fact change our lifestyle. We were using, if we look at, for example, at Pepsi or Coca-Cola, 20 years ago, we were using glass bottles. So we were reusing it. Today we have changed it. So it's our lifestyle which is in fact creating problems. So quickly, what academia is doing, so we have incorporated the subjects in our teaching about sustainability, about recycling, about awareness, about environment. And in research, there are a lot of things that we are doing. The first thing is to like develop new plastics which are from renewable sources, from the plants, from the bacteria, so that once we don't have petroleum, so we have plastics still. And then for their reuse, we are working on recycling, we are working on their circularity. So there is a lot of research which is going on at National Textile University, at NED, at UT Lahore. We have dedicated, in fact, departments of polymer engineering at 3 universities in Pakistan. So there's a lot of activity which is going on, but as you said, the level or the volume of industry in Pakistan, especially the plastic industry, which is producing plastic, is small. Of course, there's a big gap between academia and industry, and most of the initiatives which are being like done or which are developed at solution developed at in the academia are not translated to industry. Over to you.
So Dr. Yasir, I have a follow-up question on this. So in the vertical that you are in textile, are there joint research projects with your university or universities in Pakistan in the textile industry to look at the plastic waste in the processes which goes into developing textile, and even other, once the product has been made, what happens afterwards?
In fact, if we talk about textiles, so there are two, in fact, you can say the value chains or the processes at which we create waste. The first is, in fact, we called it post-industrial waste, which is created during the manufacturing of the textiles. So most of that waste is being used in the textiles. You can say 90%. The problem which is coming for the textile industry is the post-consumer waste. So post-consumer waste, which is being produced globally, only 15% of that is being used. 85% goes to landfill. And out of that 15%, only 1% is coming into the loop. The rest is being burned for the energy or things like this. So from 2025, there are a lot of regulations from European Union, from US. The industry, they will be bound to convert from 2025, at least 25% of post-consumer waste, we call landa or the things like this. So it must be used into the new product. And by 2050, 100% of the post-consumer waste, it must be used into the textile process. So there are a lot of business opportunities. In fact, collection of post-consumer textile waste is a big business opportunity. Then after collection, segregation, it's a big business opportunity. There are a lot of gaps in conversion of that post-consumer waste, either it's polyester or either it's cellulose, into the textile fibers again. So what we are doing with textile industry, we are working with most of the, with most of the top 20 exporters of textile. NTU is doing joint research products and joint development projects with them. And we are providing them solution. Recently, we licensed our technology to Interloop. It was on the development of fibers from agro waste, means using no new resources, land resources, no water, no pesticides. So we converted agro waste of banana into the fibers, and we licensed to them last year, and now they are like exporting it globally. So we are working with a lot of industries, but of course, this volume, it should be enhanced.
Thank you, Dr. Yasir. So I I'll move to Bilal. Bilal, Angro being a corporate leader in Pakistan, and you are in a lot of different verticals. What is Angro doing to reduce plastic waste? Is there a method or a mechanism for recollection or using it to upstream or up produce?
अव्वल तो हम जो प्रोडक्ट्स बनाते हैं जी वो दे आर नॉट सिंगल यूज पर से so to understand the problem of plastics you have to understand why they are bad. They are bad because they are single use. जिस तरह आप पॉलीथीन का बैग लेते हैं वो एक दफा आपने लिया फेंक दिया. It's basically you're using something that the nature has created and a lot of energy has been spent on it and you're using it only once. खाना खा रहे हैं आप उसके बाद आपने single use is the problem. So we're not in single use, first of all. The other problem in plastic is that there are some plastics which are actually ending up in the waste. आपने दरियाओं की बात की और waste dumps की बात की. ये PET bottle is not a problem. We all think it's a problem. It's not a problem because there is an economy that thrives upon the waste of this bottle. ये 3 रुपए की बिकती है मार्केट में. जब आप पानी पी लेते हैं 3 रुपए की बिकती है. हमारा पीपी बैग है वो कभी भी आपको नहीं पड़ा मिलेगा कभी भी डंप पे बिकॉज वो जैसे ही वो उस पर यूरिया निकाल लेते हैं उसमें से लोग इट बिकम्स पार्ट ऑफ देयर लाइफस्टाइल. It is reused, recycled. So those plastics are a problem which do not have an economy post their use. So PET is not an issue, PP bag is not an issue. Those, for example, biscuit wrappers are an issue. क्योंकि कोई बंदा कलेक्ट नहीं करेगा उनको. किसी एक तो वो 1 ग्राम का रैपर होता है, किसी के पास इंसेंटिव नहीं है कि वो जाके कलेक्ट करे उसको. तो इकोनॉमी नहीं है. So plastics are bad because of single use, because of no economy, those which do not have an economy. And the third, that they are non-biodegradable. जैसे ही वो इकोसिस्टम का पार्ट बनते हैं फिर उनकी बहुत लॉन्ग लाइफ है. So what Angro is doing is we are sponsors of Circular Plastic Institute. That's we have sponsored it. We're very passionate about it. Circularity is very close to my heart as well. Plastics are not bad जी. अगर आज ये चीजें नहीं होंगी हमारे पास, ये कुर्सियां नहीं होंगी तो आप क्या करेंगे? लकड़ी की बना के देंगे, दरख्त काट के बनाएंगे या हम फर्श पे बैठेंगे. Plastics are required. Plastics are the only mechanism जिसके तहत हम इंसान human beings have started improving their lifestyle. आपके घर में इंजेक्शन आता है, अगर प्लास्टिक नहीं होगा तो कैसे आप उसको यूज करेंगे? So plastic, so circularity is required. We need to make sure that whatever we use, whatever we produce in plastics, they have an economy through circularity. Whatever plastics do not have circularity are biodegradable. क्योंकि जिसके पास किसी को इंसेंटिव नहीं उठाने का और उसने वेस्ट का पार्ट बन जाना है, वो बायोडिग्रेडेबल हो ताकि वो 6 महीने, 2 महीने, 3 महीने में ऑटोमेटिकली डिकम्पोज होके. सो वी आर वर्किंग ऑन सर्कुलरिटी, वी आर वर्किंग ऑन बायोडिग्रेडेबल. हमारी कुछ हम प्रोडक्ट्स के अंदर बायोडिग्रेडेबल लाइनिंग्स इंट्रोड्यूस कर रहे हैं. बट ऑल इन ऑल I generally think that Angro is doing everything that we can in an economy where plastic is an issue, where we may not be the contributor towards that issue, but we have a responsibility, as you mentioned, as a corporation to solve the issue. And we are doing in terms of circularity and biodegradable right now.
Follow-up question on the economy of picking up these plastics. Are we really pushing towards scavenging as an economic model for these people to work? अगर हम इसके ऊपर काउंट कर रहे हैं कि कोई प्लास्टिक की बोतल उठा लेगा, कोई बैग उठा लेगा, रीयूज करते रहेगा और फिर एक टाइम ऐसा भी आएगा ना कि ये टॉक्सिन्स भी तो लीच करना स्टार्ट करेंगे ना, उस वक्त भी अगर ये यूज हो रहा है तो इसके अंदर हमारा एज अ कॉर्पोरेट, प्राइवेट सेक्टर, पब्लिक पॉलिसी क्या रोल है?
देखिए, so there are two aspects. So let me give you a personal perspective first, and then I can give you the corporate perspective, because they're two very important two faces of the same coin. देखिए, no one in this ecosystem promotes that people should be poor, but the fact of the reality is that the country is poor. या आप एक मेरा ख्याल आप वोटिंग करा लें यार, कितने लोग कहते हैं कि लोगों को भूख से मरना चाहिए, एक बंदा भी नहीं कहेगा. बट द फैक्ट ऑफ द मैटर इज दैट द कंट्री इज सफरिंग, So my personal view is that no one in this room will promote anyone, any human being living below dignity. या बेशक वो मैं हूँ, बेशक वो किसी भी रेस का बंदा हो, किसी भी जेंडर हो, मेल हो, फीमेल हो, ट्रांसजेंडर हो, every human being has to have the dignity. इसमें कोई doubt नहीं. लेकिन the reality on the ground is that I am not right now. We're talking about the entrepreneurs of the future of the country, future of the world. You have to be practical and find solutions. So what I really want people to find solutions around is जरूर ठीक करें जी, जरूर ऐसी गवर्नमेंट को वोट दें, जरूर ऐसे लोगों को लेके आए जो कि पाकिस्तान में स्कैवेंजर्स को खत्म करें. आई एम ऑल फॉर इट. लेकिन ग्रीन एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप के लिए यू शुड फोकस ऑन सर्कुलरिटी, यू शुड फोकस ऑन बायोडिग्रेडेबल थिंग्स एंड व्हाटएवर. और इस इकोसिस्टम में ग्राउंड रियलिटीज में रहते हुए जब आप एक सोल्यूशन लेके आएंगे तो फिर मेरा कॉर्पोरेशन रिस्पॉन्स ये है, देन आस्क फॉर द कॉर्पोरेशन रिस्पॉन्स. कॉर्पोरेशन रिस्पॉन्स ये है कि वी शुड ऑल be looking forward to a change that is better for the world. We want to lead it. We want to lead the world into it. But obviously, entrepreneurs have a role to play. I'm just saying the entrepreneurs will need to be more aware of the realities on the ground and try to solve things the way they should be.
I think I'll move to Shiza. Shiza, I have the same question I asked Dr. Yasir about what's the academic discourse on plastic pollution and production. And after that, why the Circular Plastic Institute? What was the reasoning behind it, the motivation, and what do you wish to achieve from the scales being? And
I think I'll move to this question number second first, and because it will then kind of roundabout to the question number one. So the idea behind setting up Circular Plastic Institute was we looked into the sphere of the plastic value chain as whole. Not just from a material perspective, but also from stakeholders' perspective. And what we noticed was there are critical elements and issues and challenges within which we can contribute. Number one, we realized that we have fragmented information. We also have fragmented research and initiatives taken by whether that be from producers, manufacturers, public policy makers, recyclers, even from entrepreneurs. We have various esteemed entrepreneurs, micro scale, and some SMEs who are in this sphere. But these are all fragmented in working in silos. So we do not have a cross-link or open access. So we want to contribute to that problem. Second, we realize that we have lagging skill set. We always talk about compliances, what is happening at the global level, global scale, what is happening at EU, their contribution and everything. But when we looked into the realities at Pakistan, we have critical skill sets that's lagging. We do not have a skill set who would produce or promote design for circularity. Or from a business perspective, we always look into feasibility, financial feasibility. We look into risk management, but we haven't any skill set per se who would look into emissions related feasibility. It's called LCA, life cycle assessment, that is also done as a early stage feasibility. It helps decision makers or even any initiative who want to change their product to make a decision. Okay, if we are what we are doing is actually a right thing. Sometimes we have wishful thinking. We think what we do is actually would make a good contribution, and that has been a case with plastic. For instance, in the food sector, there have been some concern that we want to reduce plastic, but at the same time, it reduces the lifespan of food. So you generate more food waste then. So there has to be some synergies to be looked. So sometimes we think what we want to do is actually good, but when you look into the early stage feasibilities, those decisions not necessarily may be sustainable per se. So for that perspective, you have to have certain skill set that would make you conscious, but also sustainable decisions. Then we also realize that a lot of our policies are actually promoted based on anecdotal evidences. We do not have scientifically based evidences, modeling, or baseline data to promote certain decisions, policy criteria, or maybe product standards and others. And lastly, we also found that there is no repository sort of for public sharing or public access to information. So the silos and everything that has been done, we would aim to have a criteria or maybe an environment where everybody could have an access and we do not duplicate the efforts. and we do not really reinvest or maybe loss of resources, whether that be intellectual or capital or financial. So altogether, it is just to accelerate circular economy within Pakistan, and with CPI at its heart in its place. What we want to do is we want to enable early stage, we call it applied research. By applied research, what we mean is to have a direct link and in collaboration with stakeholders that may be industrial, that may be traders, importers, exporters, that may be recyclers, entrepreneurs, SMEs, and even waste pickers. Because they are critical part of the in the recent it's actually happening. It's International Committee for Plastic Treaty. It's called INC, and that is pretty much like Paris Agreement. It's now having a binding for all these signatory countries to make certain commitments mandatory for each. And what they claim, and they have now put this in notion, is recycling without waste pickers is actually garbage. So you need to have them more. So this is more called like socially inclusive or social entrepreneurial perspective that you have to brought in the sphere. So this is also one of the things that CPI would be leading into. We don't want to just look into the emission perspective or economic perspective, but we also want to touch upon and contribute into the social elements, but also the health elements. So we do not want to have a tunnel view, but a more of a systematic and holistic view. And that would pertain not only just the plastic as whole, but looking into each polymer, because then each value chain is different, each complexities and issues are different. So serving as a panel as well.
So I have a question on that. Are there any particular verticals or industries your department is focused on?
So with plastic, this is a bit of a challenge, but also an interesting fact. If you look into one polymer per se, let's say this PET, what do you think what becomes after it becomes waste? Shahik Horasa would tell you more, but then it turns into your clothes as nylon, it turns into your shoes sometimes, it turns into school bags. And even we are now looking into the PVC value chain, and after its use, PVC is then turned into pipes, PVC is turned into shoes, PVC is turned into medical IV bags, but after then it has more than 300 product portfolio. And after recycling, it then expands. So we just have to look into each polymer and then see what the portfolios are and what their indications are, what their contributions are, and then to see within each product the challenge is different, the recyclability is different, and the challenges are different. So, and also I think this is also one of the concerns that we will be raising at CPI, that we want to generalize plastic, we want to look into specific polymer, specific value chain, because plastic is not the same. Even within this one bottle, you have HDP, high density polyethylene, you have PET, polyethylene, then you also have PVC, which is a label, you also have some glue. So within this just one bottle, you have at least 3 different polymers. So it's then different sector, yes, it's
Very
a cross
interesting,
sector.
very interesting. So before I move to Waleed, just one thing about the academic discourse, because you're in Karachi, and it is the industrial and business hub of Pakistan. So do you get to interact with other universities here? Are there prospective joint projects you might be working on? And are there products or services? Is your department a consultancy department for the industry, or you develop product and knowledge products for them to disseminate?
Yeah, I think this is a bit of what our core pillars, I would say. This is what makes us CPI a bit of a unique, and that we do not see ourselves as a single entity doing everything, but we rather believe in collaborations. So we want to bring academia on board. We have one project ongoing that we are doing with ComSat University. We have one in plan that we are doing, hopefully would be doing with NED University and UET, one with NED. So we are looking at different academic stakeholders because they bring different expertise, but then we're also looking at different industrial partners as well. So it's a cross-sectoral. So we more of a bridge and a facilitator. We would also have some in-kind or in-house expertise, let's say emission modeling and LC and others, and project management and others. But if we do not, we would bring in experts from academia and others from industry as well, because they also have certain resources that academia might not have. So that's also been an observation, but yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Waleed, you're the senior manager of packaging and sustainability. And there's a lot of plastic which goes into the processes at Unilever. How do you manage this, first of all, internally to make the processes better environment? And once that's done, how do you manage the plastic waste? Is there a way to bring it back?
Yes. So first one, we have made a very bold commitments. So first one, that is by 2025, we cut our use of virgin plastic into half. So how can we do it? There are two ways. So one is to actually reuse it back into our packaging. And second one is to actually optimize the weight of the packaging. Like this bottle, agar iski baat kare, so if agar ye 10 gram ki bottle hai, how can I make it in a 9 gram or how can I make it in 8 gram? ताकि मैं less plastic की तरफ जाऊं. Second is the better plastic. So जब हम better plastic की बात करते हैं कि it means कि plastic आपका जो होना चाहिए 100% recyclable और reusable और compostable होना चाहिए. It means that कि जब आप उसको collect करें तो recyclable होना चाहिए. Third one is कि Unilever जो जितना plastic कभी इस वक्त यानी कि environment में जा रहा है Unilever की तरफ से उसको how can we collect it back? हम उससे ज्यादा किस तरह कलेक्ट कर सकते हैं, किस तरह उसको रीप्रोसेस कर सकते हैं. सो अगर तीनों एम्बिशंस देखें तो ये तीनों आपस में दे आर इंटरकनेक्टेड डायरेक्टली. सो अगर मुझे पीसीआर चाहिए, पोस्ट कंज्यूमर रिसाइकल कंटेंट, टू यूज बैक इनटू माय पैकेजिंग, इट मींस कि वो 100% रिसाइकलेबल होनी चाहिए बॉटल. थर्ड वन ये कि उसकी कलेक्शन होनी चाहिए. सो व्हाट यूनिलीवर हैज डन रिसेंटली, सो यूनिलीवर पाकिस्तान स्पेशली, तो यूनिलीवर पाकिस्तान ने अपनी एक recently एक PCR bottle launch किए जो कि 25% PCR which we collected back from the streets of Pakistan from north to south, and then through the process of the mechanical recycling and in an appropriate manner and after having the all kind of a validation, a mechanical, physical or chemical and medical as well. So we are using it back. So this is one of the way through which we can do.
Just quick question. During COVID, 9.4 million extra tons of plastic was produced globally. What did we do with that?
So again, I believe कि सबसे पहले जो प्लास्टिक की जो रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है ना वो I believe हर किसी की रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है. So like you mentioned कि 55 बिलियन बैग्स पाकिस्तान के अंदर यूज हुए हैं. हम लोग कहें तकरीबन 220 मिलियन की पॉपुलेशन, राइट? इट मींस कि हर पाकिस्तानी 250 बैग्स पर ईयर पे यूज कर रहा है, राइट? 250 बैग्स जा रहे हैं, वो जा रहे हैं सारे के सारे मेरीन लाइफ को जिसे कहते हैं हर्डल कर रहे हैं. या सो अगेन जो कोविड के टाइम के ऊपर जब आपने मास्क यूज करना शुरू किए, मास्क के अंदर आप कहीं ना कहीं प्लास्टिक यूज कर रहे थे. सो इम्पॉर्टेंट इज सर्कुलरिटी, सर्कुलर इकोनॉमी. ठीक है, यू हैव टू मेक द डेफिनेशन. हर किसी को इंडिविजुअल रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी लेनी पड़ेगी कि जहां मैं प्लास्टिक यूज करता हूं वो प्लास्टिक रिसाइकलेबल है. क्या मैं ऐसी कंपनीज की बॉटल्स या मैं ऐसी कंपनीज को मतलब प्रमोट कर रहा हूँ या मैं ऐसी कंपनीज की मतलब पैकेजिंग खरीद रहा हूँ जो कि मतलब इन चीजों को प्रमोट करती है. थर्ड वन ये कि मेरा अपना इंडिविजुअल किरदार क्या है. सो दिस इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. अंटिल अनलेस वी डोंट डू, इसी तरीके से प्लास्टिक प्रॉब्लम पाइल अप होती जाएगी एंड देयर विल बी मोर जिसे कहते हैं प्लास्टिक इन सी देन जिसे कहते हैं ना फिशेस इन बाय 2050.
One question about, because this is localizing a global problem. So there is always a dialectic between the global and the local. So what your sustainability initiatives, how much of them are locally driven rather than driven by Unilever Global? So are there products, services, or things that you do which are for the local Pakistani market adapted to the local conditions? Because a lot of the time, transnational organizations have a cookie cutter approach. We have seen this in different verticals such as garment, textile, and we have seen the results of that, resulting in buildings getting collapsed, slave labor, and all those things. So when it comes to plastics and all these things, how much of the local is involved in taking the decision?
So although this ambition has set back global, but equally जैसे कहते हैं applicable on local as well. So what we have done, हमने जो पाकिस्तान के अंदर local initiatives लिए. So one is the जैसे कहते हैं introduction of the refill machines, shampoo refill machines. So हमने उसको last introduce करवाया. So in Islamabad and Karachi. So वहाँ पे actually as of a pilot we introduced it क्योंकि there is what we do feel के first one we need to build the awareness कि plastic को मतलब यानी कि reuse भी किया जा सकता है. How can you reduce it? अगर आप अपनी बॉटल ही को रीयूज कर लें, या फिर और कौन से ऑल्टरनेटिव्स हैं जिसको हम लोग कर सकते हैं. सो फर्स्ट वन विच वी डिड इट. सेकंड, we are looking to actually introduce reverse vending machine. So what is reverse vending machine? कि जब आप अपना प्लास्टिक यूज कर लेते हैं तो आप उसको डिस्पोज ऑफ करें इन अ मशीन, उसको कलेक्ट करें, कलेक्ट करने के बाद उसको मैकेनिकली रिसाइकल करें. मैकेनिकली रिसाइकल मींस कि आप उसको जैसे कहते हैं वॉश करें, वॉश करने के बाद उसको रेजिन फॉर्म में दोबारा कन्वर्ट करें, कन्वर्ट करने के बाद उसकी गैसिफिकेशन करें, एंड देन फिर उसको रेजिन फॉर्म में कन्वर्ट करें. जब रेजिन फॉर्म में फर्स्ट वन कन्वर्ट हो जाए, फिर उसके तमाम टेस्ट मेथड्स उसके ऊपर अप्लाई हो, और अगर वो क्वालिफाई करते हैं तो आप उसको वापस जिसे कहते हैं एक सेकंड लाइफ ऑफ प्लास्टिक उसकी स्टार्ट करें. सो वी हैव एक्चुअली जैसे कहते हैं हमने इसी साल ही यूनिलीवर ने शर्मीन पॉलीमर्स, जो कि लोकल पाकिस्तान की एक पॉलीमर्स इंडस्ट्री है, व्हाट आर दे डूइंग? दे आर डूइंग मैकेनिकली रिसाइकलिंग. दे डू हैव वन ऑफ द स्टेट ऑफ द आर्ट मशीन, दैट इज अरीमा, जो कि जितने भी पॉलीओलेफिन्स मटेरियल है उनको रिसाइकल कर रहे हैं. या सो हमने उनके साथ एक पार्टनरशिप की है, और वही उसी पार्टनरशिप के थ्रू ही हम लोग जो है वो PCR वी आर यूजिंग बैक इनटू आवर पैकेजिंग. एक और चीज जो बड़ी इंपॉर्टेंट है, बिफोर जैसे कहते हैं टू स्टार्ट दिस डिस्कशन और कमिंग टू दिस पैनल, आई वाज डिस्कसिंग विद शिला कि हमने NED के साथ एक पार्टनरशिप की, या जहाँ पे हमारा जो मेन पर्पस है actually to build the bridge between academia and industry, and second one actually to जैसे कहते हैं build the capability of Gen Z on plastic recycling, क्योंकि they don't know कि how to recycle. क्या इसकी जिस तरह शिजा ने मेंशन किया, there are 3 different type of plastic in its bottle, ठीक है, तो उसको करना किस तरीके से आगे, इंपॉर्टेंट क्या है. या सो NED के साथ जो पार्टनरशिप है उसके अंदर 2 प्रॉब्लम स्टेटमेंट है. वन इज टू हाउ टू मेक NED अ प्लास्टिक फ्री कैंपस, एंड सेकंड वन जो फ्लेक्सिबल पैकेजिंग है, या हाउ कैन वी, और जो मिक्स प्लास्टिक है, हाउ कैन वी मेक जिसे कहते हैं रिसाइकल विदाउट एनी जिसे कहते हैं ना डूइंग ऑफ इंसिनरेशन, या विदाउट एनी जिसे कहते हैं कोई भी जिसे कहते हैं हमने उसको वेस्ट के अंदर ले आके करें.
Thank you, Walid. Really interesting answers and the initiatives you guys are doing. Before I move to Dr. Sharik, I have a question for both you and Bilal. We saw that like 70% of the plastic is still not treated in Pakistan. So this is a capacity issue and a public policy issue as well. So how is the private sector supporting the government in this? Are there any mechanism or infrastructure development which the private sector itself is doing to fill that gap?
So, like I mentioned, कि यूनिलीवर ने अपनी काफी बोल्ड कमिटमेंट्स किए हैं. इसी तरह से कोक, पेप्सिको, नेस्ले, व्हाट आर दे डूइंग? इन्होंने एक ऑर्गेनाइजेशन प्लास्टिक के ऊपर एक जनरेट किया. यूनिलीवर इज वन ऑफ द फाउंडिंग मेंबर, दैट इज कोर, जिसका पर्पस ही ये कि कलेक्ट एंड रिसाइकल अलायंस बना के, मतलब यानी कि इन तमाम चीज़ों को जहाँ पे रिड्यूस कर सकें, रीयूज कर सकें, रिसाइकल कर सकें, और मिनिस्ट्रीज के साथ जैसे कहते हैं NGOs के साथ, सिविल सोसाइटी के साथ आप एक ऐसा प्लेटफॉर्म बनाएं जहाँ पे आप इस तरह की प्रैक्टिसेस को प्रमोट कर सकें, जहाँ पे आप प्लास्टिक को जिसे कहते हैं सस्टेनेबल वे के अंदर, सर्कुलर इकोनॉमी के अंदर वापस लेकर आ सकें. सो फर्स्ट वन इज टू मेक द बोल्ड कमिटमेंट्स. आपको बताना होगा कि यार आपको वर्जिन प्लास्टिक के ऊपर डिपेंडेंसी कम करनी होगी. सेकंड, आपको ये करना होगा कि आपको जितनी भी पैकेजिंग यू आर यूजिंग और जितनी भी प्लास्टिक पैकेजिंग उसके 100% रिसाइकलेबल. और थर्ड ये कि काफी बोल्ड कि क्या मैं किसी ऑल्टरनेटिव फॉर्मेट पे जा सकता हूँ प्लास्टिक के. वी ऑल नो यस प्लास्टिक इज वन ऑफ द वेरी चीप सोल्यूशन, वेरी अगर सस्टेनेबल बन सकता है जब तक हम उसको रिसाइकिल ना करें, जब तक हम उसको रिड्यूस ना करें, जब तक हम उसको रीयूज ना करें. सो क्या मैं, क्योंकि ग्लास के ऊपर मैं जाता हूँ तो ग्लास 5 टाइम्स मोर एमिट करता है गैसेस प्लास्टिक के मुकाबले में, या क्या मैं पेपर के ऊपर जाता हूँ तो मैं उतनी दरख्त काट देता हूँ, या सो वी हैव टू लुक फॉर द ऑल्टरनेटिव्स एज वेल. या मैं बायोडिग्रेडेबिलिटी की बात करता हूँ कि मैं सेलुलोज बेस्ड फाइबर बना सकता हूँ जिसको मैं प्लास्टिक के अंदर वापस यूज कर सकूं. मोरोवर इसी तरीके से क्या मेरे पास सिर्फ और सिर्फ यही जिसे कहते हैं प्लास्टिक की कमिटमेंट्स मैं लेके चलूं, क्या मेरे पास और भी कोई आगे ऑप्शन है? लाइक आई मेंशन के इंडस्ट्री और एकेडमिया की पार्टनरशिप बिल्डअप करके यू कैन जिसे कहते हैं प्रोमोट.
Thank you.
Yeah, a very candid answer to that question is, and I am being absolutely candid here, the private sector players are doing most they can. I assure you that. So they are. So Mangrove का नाम लूँगा, Mangrove को आप, if I say Mangrove is doing it, you will say देखो अपनी कंपनी की बात कर रहा है. Unilever, for example, Nestle's, Pepsi's, they are doing more than They are doing this, whatever you want, whatever you have described the problem, they're trying to solve it. And they are not really looking at economic benefit out of it. I can assure you, I'm talking about them as an independent, so please, I would be, I would not be, अगर अपनी कंपनी के बारे में कह रहा था कि देखिए यार ये बंदा क्यों अपनी कंपनी के बारे में बात, we do the same, but I don't want to say that. So we are doing all what we can, but we have to understand, Ji, we all have to learn mutually. This is an issue which does not require corporations divide. This is an issue that we all have to solve jointly. And I can assure you that responsible players are trying or doing whatever they can to solve it. मसला देखें, ये प्रॉब्लम सब रियलाइज करते हैं, लेकिन जब सॉल्यूशन निकालने की बात आती है तो वहां पे वी हैव टू बी प्रैक्टिकल एज वेल. जैसे मैं आपको बात कर रहा था, अभी ये मेज की बात कर रहा था, तो ठीक है हम प्लास्टिक खत्म कर देते हैं, ये मेज हटा दें यहाँ से, तब क्या करेंगे, अब कुर्सियां हटा दें यहाँ से, तो कोई सोल्यूशन देंगे ना कि यार ठीक है वी रिप्लेसिंग प्लास्टिक, तो अब ये लेके आए, लकड़ी तो नहीं है बिकॉज यू कैन नॉट कट ट्रीज, इट्स ऑलरेडी. And the reason I have a very candid view on this, because entrepreneurs have a very vivid role to play in this, because it's all about creating new solutions, finding resolves, passion. Corporations, we have a certain strength. We have access to capital. They have access to people like me. But entrepreneurs have very unique strengths. They can be very creative. They can be passionate about something which is very purposeful. This is very unique to entrepreneurs. So entrepreneurs have a role to play. And my request to you, they will find enough support from the corporations. Trust me, we are part of Global Plastic Action Plan. Everyone will be there to support. Finding money is not an issue, I can assure you. If you have a good idea, finding money on behalf of all corporations, I can say that finding money is not an issue. Just have a good idea, have a practical idea, and you will find money. Corporations will run behind you to give you money.
Thank you, Bilal. Really interesting. Shariq Sahab, I kept you at last because you bring two perspectives. You're someone who is engaged in a sustainability initiative yourself, and you bring a perspective from being part of the Karachi Chamber of Commerce and executive member of FPCCI. Starting with your own initiative, what have you done and how are you contributing towards plastic sustainability in Pakistan?
First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to this very knowledgeable audience. I'm the founder of a company in Pakistan which started PET bottles recycling in year 2001. That means we are in this recycling business for last 21 years. That makes us the first compliant corporate sector company to enter into this business. And since 2001, we are exporting trash to all over the world. We have been exporting to China, and then 2017, China banned imports of all wastes, including plastics. But that was not for environment reasons. That was a political decision. I can probably, if any of the students would like to know why it was a political decision, I can educate them. So we started our journey in 2001 with a very, very small company, and our first consignment exported to China was a small 20-feet container in which we baled these PET bottles, which is the post-consumer plastics, and we exported it to China. Very interesting, when the consignment arrived at the buyer's factory, the total value of the consignment was around $2,000, and they lodged a claim against our company for $15,000. So we were really surprised that we exported a consignment just $2,000 and we have a claim for $15,000. And China through their corporate and infrastructure, which is AQSIQ, which is an environmental regulatory body in China, which regulates the entire process. They have a system that no company anywhere in the world can export to China unless that has an approval from their environment agency. So China was the first country which came with a very brilliant idea how to control all these things. We went to China, asked the supplier, asked our buyer, what's wrong, sir? So he said, I bought this from you. I said, yes. He said, कि आपने जो हमको एक्सपोर्ट किया है, उन बॉटल्स के अंदर आपने कील, नेल्स जो है ना, लोहे के वो डाले हुए थे. तो हमने तो समझा कि आपने हमको बॉटल्स सप्लाई किए हैं, हमने अपने क्रशर्स में डाल दिया, हमारे क्रशर्स के सारे ब्लेड टूट गए और हमारा पूरा जो सिस्टम है वो तबाह हो गया. उसका ये बिल है $15,000. Do you want to pay this bill or we ban your company from exporting from Pakistan to China forever? So I said, okay, sir, we will pay. So we started this way. And then, of course, दुनिया में जो plastics recycling है, वो is at a very, very advanced stage. It is a misconception also that in Pakistan, plastic recycling industry जो है वो किसी infancy की stage पर है. It's not like that. Pakistan's recycling industry, if not at the world standard, but at least at a very good standard. अब आप पूछेंगे कि कैसे? It's not because Sindh government has done or federal government has done or Ministry of Climate Change has done something. Thanks to poverty. गुर्बत, scavengers, rag pickers जो हैं, वो सारा plastics, not only plastics, but each and every recyclable material, whether it's plastics, whether it is rag, whether it is metal, is collected and supplied to the recycling industry. Now the question is whether that recycler is a compliant recycler or is a recycler who is recycling in a neighborhood of a residential colony. So that is the challenge which Pakistan facing. Let me just give you a detail of that. A lot of people say, like you said, and some other speakers too, that our collection of plastic waste is just 30% or 20%. I totally disagree with this figure. First of all, in Pakistan, we have a fashion that we give figures just because we have read it in a newspaper or nowadays through WhatsApp University. And we quote it कि जी ये मैंने WhatsApp पे पढ़ा है कि पाकिस्तान में 70% जो है वो प्लास्टिक वेस्ट कलेक्ट नहीं होता. Believe me, Shiza wouldn't know कि जो बॉटल पानी की इसने आज सुबह अपने घर में पीकर डस्टबिन में डाली है, वो हो सकता है कि मेरे प्लांट पर पहुंचकर रिसाइकल हो रही हो. This is the situation. Not only in Pakistan, but all over the world, all recyclable materials are now in short supply. The main challenge to the recycling industry in Pakistan, as well as elsewhere in the world, is not enough quantities to make a recycling unit viable. This is a situation in Europe, this is a situation in US, in China, in Pakistan too. Now, what the world has done, दुनिया ने recycling को viable industry बनाने के लिए क्या किया? OECD countries ने, Europe ने legislation कर लिया. Their legislation, to cut the story short, they have incentivized recycling industry. The prices, I think Bilal would know, that the prices of recycled PET resin is higher than virgin resin. And not just 5, 3, 4%, 20%. I am exporter, we export recycled PET flakes at a price which is 20% higher than the virgin plastic produced by Gatron Nova, right? This is all over the world. So this is the only way to control pollution. This is the only way to promote recycling, and that is through economic incentives. Talking about social compliance, social passion, love for the climate, and love for the oceans and all these things. Maybe for young people, young students, it's a very, very sensitive issue. But believe me, not for the world. This world goes by a number, and that is economic numbers. If the recycling industry would make it an economically viable project, it will work, otherwise not.
Thank you, Dr. Sharik sir. Okay, we are running out of time, so I'll take like a few questions, I think 3 questions, and please keep them short.
हमारे यहाँ जो एग्रीकल्चर होता है बनाना का वो 30% होता है एग्रीकल्चर, और वो 3 to 5 years में उसकी जो वो है पौधा है उसको आपको उतारना पड़ता है, उससे निकालना पड़ता है उसी से, और वो फिर दोबारा आ जाता है। तो वो इस वक्त सबसे बेस्ट है मलेशिया, श्रीलंका, इंडिया में वो टेक्नोलॉजीज हैं इस वक्त, और मैं समझता हूँ कम से कम वो 30 to 40% आपका रिप्लेसमेंट है आपकी प्लास्टिक का।
Yes, I completely agree with you, sir. Banana fiber, बहुत सारा बायोफ्यूल ऐसा है जो कि प्लास्टिक का ऑल्टरनेटिव बन सकता है, बन रहा है। जी जी बिल्कुल, आई अंडरस्टैंड। वो लकड़ी कटती है और बन रही होती है। सो देखिए, मैं ये कह सकता हूँ कि जहाँ पे इस पे भी खासी इनोवेशन पाकिस्तान में हो रही है। इंटरलूप, आई एम श्योर यू आर अवेयर ऑफ इंटरलूप। दे हैव ऑलरेडी अनाउंस्ड, दे आर वेरी रिस्पेक्टेबल कंपनी, माशाल्लाह, बहुत इनोवेटिव है। तो उस पे भी दे आर वर्किंग ऑन नाउ डेवलपिंग, कन्वर्टिंग दैट फाइबर इनटू टेक्सटाइल्स। सो great point, and I think you should you will find enough takers. If not 5 of us, there will be enough takers in the industry who will not only like to agree with you, but also are already ahead in terms of your but thank you for mentioning it. Really, it's a great idea, to be honest.
This is Dr. Nusrat Khan, former Director General for National Institute of Oceanography. Plastic and plastic advocacy is very close to our heart. We have been working on plastic since very long. Actually, plastic ki jab hum baat karte hain, again, this is Bilal said, it's a very important material for our life. It started in early 50s, and we love using that. The problem is associated with the plastic, especially packaging and the engro. जो double layer plastics होती है, जो packaging है, is the biggest problem for disposal and for recycling as well. Yes, PET bottles collecting maybe 90% of it. जो हम roadside पे plastic या waste देखते हैं, is only 10 to 20%, and rest being picked directly or indirectly by picker. जो 20% plastic is so problematic, especially the thin layer plastic, double layer plastics, and this very much concern. और एक और चीज जो थोड़ा सा मिसिंग है, अभी तक हमने कोई प्लास्टिक पॉलिसी नहीं बनाई है. Internationally, plastic policy is going to be implemented very quickly, because I was parcel of that international plastic policy. उसकी जो initial inceptions थी in पाकिस्तान, हम उसका हिस्सा रहे हैं. तो आपका जो शिजा इंस्टीट्यूट है, तो kindly do look into the policies for that and get ready for the international plastic policy going to be implemented. We have to get ready for that as well. Thank you.
Those CPIs are actually being part of several of such initiatives, and PEP is one, National Plastic Action Policy, now that Pakistan would soon be launching. So we are very closely working with policymakers, hopefully, and we will have several recommendations and policy briefs and policy recommendation developed for policy to facilitate, again, just looking into all the value chain and the stakeholders at heart. Yeah.
So there was a comment that well, like all plastics are here to stay. Like let's be real. I agree with that as well. But I wanted to ask, if all plastics are not a problem, then can plastics be recycled infinitely? If Shiza could answer that question, that would be great. Can plastics be recycled infinitely? That's one question. And second, Sharik Purasa, the practice of selling post-consumer waste by households or by locals, markets and everything, is that a good practice for the industry, or does that create pressures on the pickers and the scavengers as well? So these two questions.
Yeah, just to answer, so one of the target for CPI actually we are heading for our agenda 2023 is actually to make a list of problematic plastics in Pakistan, what are the item list and what are the plastic lists that are problematic and hard to recycle. And yes, it cannot be recycled infinitely, but then it also depends upon the recyclers, what sort of a formulation they are using, because I have seen PVC polymer recyclers who have they claim at least if we change certain ratio of virgin, we can at least do it 500 plus times the recycling of a same PVC pipe. So it really depends upon the formulation, but in a nutshell, if you're just going to reuse the same bottle and without mixing any virgin content, then no, it cannot be recycled infinitely. Yeah.
First of all, I must tell you that worldwide, globally, the most challenging situation is about the single-use plastics, the plastics which we use as wrappers and biscuits and chocolates and all these things. Pakistan's problem for single-use plastic is more challenging because of poverty. Our poor communities, they consume a lot of such biscuits and sweet things. So that is a challenge in Pakistan as well as world over. World is trying to find a pyrolysis sort of a solution for single-use plastics. But the problem is how to, first of all, arrest it, how to, first of all, get it, pressed it, and then deliver to a recycling company. I think world is trying its best to. I went to Germany some 2-3 years ago, and I found they have found a very good way, at least in the restaurants, they have kept small plastic dustbins on each and every table. So they expect that all the post-consumer films should be put in the dustbin, and then they bag it. And then I think we in Pakistan at least can start these dustbins in the restaurants tables, so that at least where there is a possibility of arresting that single-use plastics we can do. Now, your question about PET bottles, you see, there is a practical aspect and there is a drawing room discussion. The practical aspect is that in Pakistan, hard plastics recycling is doing very well, except that the policy of the Ministry of Climate Change, unfortunately, Pakistan produces around 2.5 million tons of plastics together with imports. About more than 500,000 tons we produce locally and rest we import. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to come up with a policy either from the government or from the private sector, unfortunately also from the chamber or federation, that we have not been able to, start any sort of research in the private sectors how to handle this. So this 2.5 million first use, virgin plastic use, and then it comes into, of course, either in the landfills or is picked by the scavengers or rag pickers. There should be a compliant policy. Once that policy takes place, I think a lot of green entrepreneurship will start. And a lot of students passing out from this institute or from other universities, I think they will take this business as career business, because that will be an incentive, that will be an industry which will then be financed by the government or by the state bank or by the banks, because this recycling industry is capital intensive. It is capital intensive, and then it is labor intensive. So in Pakistan, we have a lot of labor, very cheap labor as compared to the world, but unfortunately, the capital cost in Pakistan is expensive. So once this capital side is taken care by State Bank of Pakistan or other financial institutions, I think Pakistan can become a great, great potential exporter for recycled plastics to the world. World is short of recycled plastics.
So I think one policy recommendation would be having a policy. So yeah, I think
हेलो जी, आई हैव वन क्वेश्चन. थोड़ा सा हमें बिहेवियर चेंज के ऊपर भी काम करना पड़ेगा, क्योंकि हम लोग जितना पैकेजिंग मटेरियल यूज करते हैं दुनिया में, इतना पैकेजिंग मटेरियल यूज नहीं होता. इसके अलावा हम रिसाइकलिंग फूड के लिए जो मटेरियल्स यूज करते हैं, जो अब बहुत ज्यादा ट्रेंड हो गया, हर चीज को इंडिविजुअल पैकिंग, मैनी लेयर पैकिंग, हम इसको भी कंट्रोल कर सकते हैं. और बहुत सी स्मार्ट सॉल्यूशंस हैं, यानी फार्मास्यूटिकल जो है एक मेडिसिन को 4 चीजों में बंद करती है, उसकी लेयरिंग पैकेजिंग, फिर उसको हाउ टू डिस्पोज करेंगे, ये सारी चीजें. तो ये थोड़ी बिहेवियर चेंज पे भी बात होनी चाहिए.
Thank you. Because absolutely, education and knowing about how to use plastic goes hand in hand with what's going on the ground. So policy recommendation, again, having a policy, and there should be a common ground where everyone's working together. So we are already over time. So I would like to have a round of applause for the panelists and the chair. Thank you.
Thank you to all the panelists. With this, we conclude our first session. The second program will begin at 2 p.m. After this short break, enjoy your meals. Thank you.
Thank you.